but my music has a singular compositional vision which integrates the two traditions right from inception. It can express emotions in a way that sometimes words cannot, or maybe in different ways than words can. Despite the fact that you have the distinctive nature of gamakas of Carnatic music, there is still a lot of space for dialogue between the two kinds of instruments. There are other things to explore, other dimensions, other forms and structures, other aspects of Indian culture. So I'll start by discussing the main pillars of Western classical architecture. And there are two: harmony and counterpoint. Harmony, most people are familiar with. It's a system of chords and chord progressions, but counterpoint is a little bit less familiar to most, and that is the layering of multiple independent melodic lines over each other. And the most comprehensive form of counterpoint is Baroque counterpoint. In Indian classical music, it has been combined in fusion experiments with harmony, and it has been, particularly Indian classical melodies have been combined in film music along the harmonic dimension. But a combination of Indian ragas and gamakas have not been similarly explored with counterpoint. And that's what my music is doing, which it takes the ragas and gamakas of Carnatic music and it integrates them with Baroque counterpoint. This combination in the first piece is done in the form of a fugue as well as a kriti, and a fugue is the most developed form of counterpoint. And in doing so, I tried to fuse the two traditions at a very fundamental level. There are many great experiments in fusion where artists from both traditions play alongside each other, but my music has a singular compositional vision which integrates the two traditions right from inception. Well, two words: Brinda and Bach. Brindama and Bach were the two primary influences on my music. First, about Brindama. When I lived with my sister in Bombay, Brindama would stay with us for a couple of months each summer when she taught advanced students in Bombay. And I got to know her very well personally. I'd play cards with her. She played a mean game of rummy. And she'd send me to Matunga Market, to buy betel leaves, which she loved to chew. But most of all, I loved sitting by her as she sang. Her subtle gamakas, and the jewel box-like intricacy of her music. And even for a 13, 14-year-old, I knew that this was something very special. Later, after college, I left to go to Berkeley for grad school in applied mathematics. And that was the first time I encountered Western classical music. That was because in 1982, there was no internet. India was pretty isolated as a socialist country, and being from a middle-class family, I had had no exposure to Western classical music at all. So I took an initial survey course on Western classical music in a big lecture hall at Berkeley, and what I listened to blew me away. And in particular, the music of J.S. Bach completely captivated me. His form of intricacy, of the intricacy of the architecture of counterpoint. And at some level, I realized that I had the same emotion I had when I was listening to Brindama. On the surface, they felt very, very different, but they shared something fundamental between them. Perhaps a shared concept, a shared way of development, and a shared devotion to intricacy. And that's when it came home to me that these two forms of intricacy belong together: the intricacy of gamakas and the intricacy of counterpoint. This piece is about the emotional landscape of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's anguish is something that everyone can relate with. All of us have been in a situation where we've been torn between two alternatives and really not knowing which is the right path to take. For me, music is a way not only to express emotion, but to work through it, and it can express emotions in a way that sometimes words cannot, or maybe in different ways than words can. I've always felt a personal connection to the Gita and its teachings, as have millions of other people. And the music, it goes through the illumination and the revelation and the teachings of the Gita as well. To me, the idea of nishkama karma, of non-attachment to the fruits of your actions, is something that is so powerful. It is something that I turn to at times of stress and anxiety. I think that Gita's teachings are both timeless and also really timely in today's world. So even in an abstract piece like the Fukriti, emotion is at the core of the composition process. And in that piece, it's my own personal reaction and almost working through my emotions to the world I see around me. So, and that's done in a very visceral kind of way. So the piece moves from a sense of tranquility and then moves on to a real sense of foreboding. However, at the same time, when you have the soloists continue, despite the dissonance of the strings, with their gamakas, with their counterpoint, to me, that is also my hope that there is still joy, there is still community, and there is still hope, even in the midst of chaos. It may seem that Carnatic instruments and Western classical instruments are from completely different worlds, and therefore that it would be very difficult to bring them together. But it was interesting to realize that even though they developed separately, it was primarily for historical and geographic reasons, but that in terms of tone quality, there's actually a lot that they have to say to each other. And so, despite the fact that you have the distinctive nature of gamakas of Carnatic music, there is still a lot of space for dialogue between the two kinds of instruments. The combination of these different instruments creates some pretty striking sonic opportunities. For instance, the plucked resonant notes of the harp echoing those of the veena, or the lines of the oboe, and even those of the trumpet, which I wouldn't have guessed initially, interweaving with the gamakas of the violin and the veena. But given the central role of gamakas in my music, the music naturally focuses more on the Carnatic instruments. It was really a privilege to work with musicians of the caliber of Shraddha Ravindran on the violin, with R. Tyagarajan on the flute, with K.R. Srivats on the veena, and Manarkoil Dr. J. Balaji on the mridangam. It was a real pleasure to work with all of these great musicians. There's just a world of possibilities remaining, even just within the combination of Carnatic music and Baroque counterpoint. For instance, including vocal music, I have the advantage and pleasure of having Geeta, my sister, as a wonderful singer that I can incorporate, assuming I can sweet talk her into doing it. There are other things to explore, other dimensions, other forms and structures, other aspects of Indian culture to highlight. I just feel very lucky to be on this musical journey and to share with you music that brings together these two extraordinary musical traditions.